We're going to start with the pre-agenda meeting for the Town of Spencer Board of Aldermen for the month of August. And then we will have a joint meeting with the Rowan County Board of Commissioners beginning at 6 o'clock to hear the results of the Long Ferry Road corridor study that's been done. And then if needed, we can reconvene our board meeting, although I doubt we'll need to. So in the next 26 minutes, we're going to get our agenda set for our meeting next Tuesday, which is our regular meeting. And so, board, with that, we will begin with an invocation. You will pray with me. Father, we thank you for the much needed rain that you have sent and cooler weather. We thank you for those that are here tonight to learn about the ongoing work within our communities. We thank you for the leadership that you've set before us and for being able to have an opportunity to work together. Amen. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, board, we are going to begin with a mural public art project update from Mr. Harris.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is just a very quick overview of where we are on the public art mural project. Sky just recently got back from being out of the country. She will be back in the office tomorrow. But I did want to give you an update on the Dollar General mural. The artist is actually pregnant, and so the timeline for getting this work started was actually time is of the essence. So she has actually already begun painting this mural on the side of the Dollar General building. The mural committee spent several weeks going over this design, and they chose, as you can see in your packets, this Welcome to Spencer mural, which is very fun. It has bright colors, and it emphasizes the Gateway of Rowan County aspect of our town's branding. So you can see the town of Spencer with the Wilcox Bridge in the background, our famous albino squirrels, our bicycling, trains, and our focus on transportation. So again, this mural is currently being painted and it should be finished by August 12th. So if you drive by the Dollar General building up by Jefferson Street, you should see progress. I drove by today and it's looking pretty good. Do you have any questions about this project?
Nope, just excited to see artwork happening downtown.
All right, thank you. And I will just add that the property owner did contribute $6,000 for this project, so we are grateful to him for helping with this work.
Good.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you, Kyle.
All right, board. Next items to set for our agenda. We're going to review that draft agenda. I do need a volunteer to give the invocation for that meeting.
I'll give it.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. And then we will have an opportunity for additions or deletions and adoption of the agenda. Mr. Francis, are there any proposed additions or deletions from staff?
The only change would be under the departmental reports. We're actually going to request to remove the finance report due to the timing from the last meeting and also some of the audit work that's underway. That report has not been generated for this agenda.
Okay. So, board, there's a request to remove item F from this month's agenda. Board good with that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Board, any other additions or deletions to the proposed agenda? Hearing none. We have recognitions, and Mr. Francis has asked to make a staff recognition. Are there other recognitions to be made by the board?
I want us to recognize Rusty Miller, but I don't know if we want to do it this one or the one in September. I mean, I don't know.
You can acknowledge it. Let's save that and let's do that in September. when we have the
Okay,
opportunity
okay,
to
we'll just
truly
acknowledge them then,
prepare
okay,
for it. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
too.
And I would like to say thank you for the National Night Out. For
Yes.
this department.
All right.
I have a question. Are we postponing the presentation of the field diploma boardroom at that? I thought it was going to be in August.
I can give an update on that.
Okay.
We have been working with the folks that helped us with our signage in here on the artwork, so that's still in process.
Right.
We were aiming for August.
Right.
We're likely going to be. There's a chance that we could put something together still later in the month, some sort of standalone type event, but that's where we are on it. We have.
I want you to do it right
Yeah.
as far as I go. So I don't think it's necessary we have to do it this month, but I'm just curious because
Yes.
we had temporarily said August would be the month we'll shoot.
That was yes, and we have some pictures that we're trying to use, and we were hoping to get some maybe better. One of the pictures we have is from the newspaper,
Right.
so we're trying to figure out if that one will work or if we'll have to use a different one, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But it
That's
seems
fine.
to be going along well.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather you take your time and do it right.
Let me do a welcome back and an appreciation to the schools, staff, students, administrators, etc. I'll
Okay.
write up something real brief because they start school the very next day.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Hearing none, we've got a few resolutions and ordinances to consider. One is the health center grant that I think we deferred from last month's agenda, correct? And we had that on the consent agenda.
Well, we actually had not put it there. We were going to, then we
Right.
didn't get the materials and such, but we do have the materials now. We've confirmed as much as we can with the folks at the health center. I actually talked last week with Mr. Douglas in East Spencer, and was trying my best to get him in touch with the Mr. Holloman. So as far as we could tell, this is ready for us to consider.
All right. So on our consent agenda, we have approval of the minutes. I did forget to ask Ms. Sledge anything.
Those,
I know you've
those
reviewed
were
them, so-
reviewed, yes.
Okay.
Mm.
So is the board good to keep those on the consent agenda? And then resolution 23-17. Do you want to add that to the consent agenda? We were going to do it last month, and we had planned to put it on the consent agenda.
I'd like to see it. Go ahead and bring it up. You know.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can do that.
I
So
think
we will
that's a
keep
good
that
thing. Yeah.
as a regular agenda item.
Yeah.
The next item, item 8, is ordinance 23-18 for temporary lane closure on US Highway 29. This is in reference to the annual Race to the River event as part of Rowan Creek Week.
Right.
That I would suggest be a consent agenda item.
That's fine as long as the public understands. I know we're going to put out a lot of publicity as far as that goes. As long as we know.
Certainly.
Yeah, and that we do have a plan for that. Joe Morris is working with DOT to have a road sign, one of the electronic signs,
That's fine.
approximately a week in advance, I think.
That's fine.
Yeah. And we will continue to give updates to everybody about the event.
That's fine. I don't have a problem
Got it.
putting it on the consent agenda.
Consent agenda for item 8 then, and then item 9 is the disposition and acquisition of police vehicles, ordinance 23.14003.
I can give an overview of this, Mayor, members of the board. This is an opportunity to purchase a used Ford SUV police vehicle from the town of Rockville. It comes equipped with quite a bit of equipment. There's a few additions that would need to be made and some changes to the exterior, because right now it appears to be a Rockville police vehicle and we need it to look like a Spencer vehicle. But the benefit to this would be we were not anticipating purchasing a vehicle like this, but when it presented itself, we realized it would be a helpful way to retire some additional older surplus vehicles that we're hanging on to for the purpose of having some spares. This would give us a a newer vehicle that would allow a few of our other current vehicles to be more reliable spare, in other words, than what we currently have, if that makes sense. So the idea is we would wind up surplusing and auctioning off, I think about 7 vehicles at first, and we already had about 4 ready to go, but we're going to be able to do about 7. And though we anticipate that would offset the cost of purchasing this used vehicle. I think it has, is this the 40,000 mile? Yes, it has 40,000 miles on it. So it's still got a lot of life in it. I think a 2018, 2017. So it's a used vehicle, but it's not a very old used vehicle. So what is proposed is a budget amendment to show in our capital reserve and replacement fund the sale of those 7 used vehicles, and then the purchase of this vehicle and some equipment, and those costs offset each other.
As a reminder, how do we sell these used vehicles?
We typically auction them off using GovDeals, which is an online government form of eBay, basically.
Okay.
So, Board, do you want that as a regular agenda item or consent agenda?
Go with consent.
Okay, so that is consent. And then we will get an update from staff related to the US Highway 29 corridor. That'll be Mr. Blunt's presentation, correct? Okay, so that'll stay as a regular agenda item. And then departmental reports, with the exception of finance report. Now, manager report, requesting comments by the mayor and board, and executive session if needed. Is there anything else that needs to be added to next week's agenda? Okay. Very good. Well, then that has our agenda set for Tuesday. Is there any reason at this point to go into executive session this evening? All right. Hearing none, I would ask the board for a motion to adjourn this meeting, and then we will reconvene at 6 o'clock with the board or the county commissioners for our joint meeting, and we'll call that meeting to order.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Miller, second by Ms. Sledge. All in favor? All right. All opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you all very much. We will reconvene at 6 p.m. in just a few minutes. All right, good evening. We are calling the Spencer Board of Aldermen together for a special joint meeting with Rowan County Commissioners for the purpose of hearing the results of the Long Ferry Road Corridor Study.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and we'll call Rowan County Board of Commissioners into session as well.
All right, let's begin with an invocation. Father, we thank you for this evening. We thank you for the chance to once again be together. We thank you for the opportunity to sit as two boards united as one in the progress for our communities throughout Rowan County. We thank you for the leaders that you have placed in these communities, and we especially thank you for the citizens that choose to live, work, and play here in Spencer and greater North Rowan and all of Rowan County. Be with us tonight. Help us to take the information we hear with open ears, open minds, and open hearts. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will start with a few introductory remarks before we get into the presentation. And so what I will say, we have a great crowd here tonight that has come to hear just as we have. And what we have to say is that we basically know the results of this study about as much as each of you do. So we are eager to hear the results of this study. But the study was intended to basically look at future development, plan developments, and potential development patterns along Long Ferry Road and determine what the potential traffic impacts were and any improvements that would be needed to minimize traffic congestion in the area. And so we're going to hear that information from the consultant WSP tonight that has done this corridor study. And we thank the Board of Commissioners for the opportunity to sit down together and hear this information. We also thank both planning departments for Rowan County and the town of Spencer for being able to work together to make this study happen and making sure that we are making good decisions within our communities and that we understand future impacts of development within these communities. Chairman Eds, I'll let you say a few introductory remarks as well.
Ditto. You know, there's been talk of some development on Long Ferry Road, but what hasn't really been discussed is on the west side of Long Ferry, of I-85. And so there's a lot that's happening there. And so with talk of some development, we thought it was a good idea, in talking with the planning department, to look at everything, you know, coming from the west side through Spencer up to 85 and then heading down Long Ferry Road a bit. So better to look at this now than later, and so we appreciate our planning board and the lead they took in this. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. We'll invite Ed Muir forward from the Planning and Development Department with Rowan County. He is the director for that department. Mr. Muir.
Well, thank you. The mayor and the chair county board did a good job of sort of doing what I thought I might do in terms of providing some background. But I would start by saying that when we reviewed the Red Rock project's traffic impact analysis last year, we noticed that there was 2.6 million square feet of warehouse and distribution that was proposed, and they would generate about 11,200 trips based on that project. We had serious concerns about that project and what it meant for the Long Ferry corridor, notably because the capacity of Long Ferry Road is around 11,000 vehicles per day now without that project. And the other thing, and this was pointed out to me by Shane Stewart, the assistant planner, he said that there was one of the left-hand turning movements in the Red Rock project had a 21.5-minute delay. That's somebody sitting, waiting to make a left-hand turn to come back towards the town of Spencer or 85, 21.5 minutes. So when we looked at that TIA, we were also reminded of a project in 2017 that was the coal ash remediation project that is at the Buck Steam plant. the increase in truck traffic that was generated because of that project. And then we all know the 2018 project where the Chewy distribution facility and its 1,500 employees has prompted a deputy to be there at the AM, PM hours as traffic control. So we knew that Long Ferry had some significant challenges if projects like Red Rock and then the other things that are happening on the east side, on the west side in Spencer that were occurring. And truthfully, we weren't really aware of all of them. It wasn't until we began talking about this study and discussing with Steve about the interest that Spencer was having. It's a good problem to have for growth, but it also brings challenges. So we decided to utilize the MPO funds to conduct this study, and it seemed logical to partner with the town of Spencer. Both have land use jurisdiction in this area. And so the goal or the purpose of the study were threefold. We wanted to improve safety and operations in the corridor, and also propose road cross sections that fit within the corridor. And then third, be sure that these cross sections accommodate the increase in traffic volumes. The study objectives, there were 6 particular elements that we wanted to focus on. The first is safety. With an increase in traffic and development, we want the general public and the area residents and the businesses and industries that use this corridor to be safe. Policies were the second element. We want to propose roadway recommendations for new development that will share or incur the costs of improvements and not compromise the corridor. Economic growth or economic development. We want policies that encourage job creation and tax base in the corridor. And the impacts, we want to assess the development potential within the corridor and develop recommendations for road improvements that accommodate growth. And Bradley Reynolds is here from WSP, and he'll talk a little bit more about the rationale or the method to our madness, if you will, in developing these recommendations. And then the operations and mobility, I think, sort of go together, but we want to ensure the corridor functions as efficiently as possible to move traffic. So that's sort of how we got to this point. Again, we thank you for your time tonight, and I'm going to let Bradley step up here and talk to you a little bit about how we developed the study. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Town of Spencer and Rowan County, for having us tonight. We're excited to share the findings of this study and also get your all's feedback. So as Ed mentioned, we really approached this trying to look at this corridor to assess future economic development and while maintaining mobility, safety, and operations along this corridor. This map shows the existing zoning along the Long Ferry Road corridor. It's a mix of zoning. There's I-85 commercial district zoning, there's commercial, business, industrial, some rural, residential, and then some mixed use as well. This next map is showing proposed development along the corridor. So these are specific properties that have been identified with potential plans. And as you'll see in the purple are the light residential. So on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, the large area there is the Red Rocks development east of I-85. And then west of I-85 in the town of Spencer, there are a number of different light use, light industrial, warehouse, and truck stop proposed along the corridor as well. So there are a lot of known large-scale developments along this corridor. So those are developments that we took specifically into account in this study. Now, as Ed mentioned, we wanted to look at the economic and development potential of the corridor and the land uses surrounding Long Ferry Road. So additionally, we looked at other parcels and their development potential. That does not mean that these parcels are going to develop by the 2030 horizon year, but what if they did, and what if they developed into manufacturing, light industrial, or higher residential land uses that would increase traffic along the corridor. So those different parcels that are shown, we accounted for those in looking at 20, 30-year traffic projections as well as access along the corridor, and help to use that to determine potential mitigation or improvements along the corridor that may be needed to provide operational that are acceptable. So this existing to volume capacity map looks at daily projected volumes or daily volumes that are out there today versus the capacity of the corridor. So Long Prairie Road is a 2-lane roadway primarily with approximately 11,000 ADT. And today there's generally less than that amount of traffic on the roadway. So about 5,000 to 6,000 cars per day west of I-85 in town of Spencer, 7,500 to 9,000 cars per day east of I-85 near Chewy, and then it drops off a little bit as you start to get more towards the Duke Power Station and out towards Leonard Road. So this map is just showing visually that, hey, the yellow and green means there's more capacity out there than the actual volumes today. In 2030, when we look at a build network of these land uses being rebuilt or developed, and that additional traffic being on Long Prairie Road, that color changes. It changes to red, which is well over capacity of the existing Long Prairie Road network. So this just shows, hey, there is a capacity constraint that does not handle the potential development that could occur along this corridor. This next map shows in 2030 with redevelopment, but also now with roadway improvements, with capacity improvements. We're seeing not necessarily all green. It doesn't make the congestion or the traffic go away, but it does start to get it back to level of service, and we use that term in traffic engineering a lot to say how the roadways are generally operating, the level of congestion, the amount of delay, generally back to level of service D or better, which is generally deemed an acceptable level of service along an intersection or corridor. So we have looked at different mitigation improvements, which we'll get into next, to help kind of bring that level of service back to an acceptable level with future development on the corridor. Next slide shows typical sections that we looked at. We looked at 7 different segments along this 2.8-mile corridor, and what we're showing here are each part of the corridor has a different volume and operates a little bit differently. So we have different cross sections that we're recommending. So in and around the interchange area, the bridge and the service road at I-85, we're recommending a wider cross section, a 4-lane divided cross section with auxiliary turn lane. West of I-85, we're recommending pedestrian accommodations, so sidewalks, bike lanes, things of that nature to really help pedestrian and multimodal traffic in the town of Spencer. West of I-85, we're looking at a bit more rural, so paved shoulders, wider shoulders for heavier truck traffic, things of that nature to provide the operations that are needed for that corridor as well. This slide has a lot of numbers on it, but this basically breaks down what we were just talking about. Is each segment, each of these 7 segments has a different typical section or a cross section. How many lanes? Is there a median? Is there a sidewalk? Is there a bike lane? And then what the right-of-way width would be minimum to accommodate that. And one of the main goals that Ed mentioned of the study is to help high-level set that footprint for future right-of-way dedication and accommodation, so that as development occurs, it's not encroaching upon land uses up against the corridor. Starting on the western side of the corridor near US 29 and in town of Spencer, these are, starting on the top half of this screen here, is a typical 2-lane undivided section from 29 across the existing at-grade railroad tracks up to around Lane Street, 5-row road. And so it's a 2-lane roadway with bike lanes, with sidewalk accommodations. And then it transitions to a 2-lane divided section, which can accommodate a center turn lane, as well as still maintaining sidewalks, and bike lanes. So this is just an image of, we did roadway layouts, cost estimates for this concept, and I know it's a little bit hard to see. We can zoom in as needed to look at particular locations if needed. But this is a cross section showing the right-of-way, the access management, as well as kind of the general footprint of the corridor. And we'll go to the next slide, but we'll be happy to zoom in or focus on areas a little bit later. So now as we transition more from town of Spencer to the I-85 interchange area where we have Montclair, Hinkle, and Front Creek service roads where that's servicing Chewy, we have a very different width of roadway that's needed to accommodate traffic. A lot of the traffic in future development is really concentrated between the two service roads and the interchange. It makes sense. Trucks, industrial, they're trying to get to and from I-85, and a lot of the additional widening is occurring within those limits. So we're proposing a 4-lane median divided section with bike lanes and sidewalks up to kind of through the service road of Montclair and Hinkle, and then also along and over the overpass of Long Ferry and I-85. That is a capacity constraint long term, and it's a very kind of expensive project to improve the interchange. But that is a capacity constraint. So one option here is to widen that existing structure to a 6-lane facility to provide the appropriate turn lanes on and off of the interchange to flow and have traffic operate acceptably through that area. The other thing I'll note before moving to the Rowan County or east side of Long Ferry is working with Spencer and the development that is coming in along the corridor in the spec and the Johnson distribution facility that's being considered. Hinkle and Montclair is proposed to be realigned, shifted further away from the existing interchange ramp to provide additional spacing, which is a good thing from an access management and spacing of major intersections. There's just another treatment that was considered for this corridor. And this is a conceptual layout of the interchange area. A little bit hard to see from this vantage point, but it does show the realignment of Montclair and Hinkle on the left-hand side of the page with the shaded pink or red, the proposed development of Johnson distribution and truck stop and other developments. And then there is a widened bridge cross section here, and then some additional turn lanes at Front Creek Service Road and transitioning over towards the Rowan County side. So the last slides on the typical section show things east of I-85 and near Chewy. This is showing a 4-lane median divided section again through that service road area. And then it will gradually transition back to an undivided 3-lane section, so through the Red Rocks frontage road area. Now there may also be auxiliary turn lanes, right turn lanes in and out of the Red Rock site that aren't explicitly shown on this conceptual cross section, but those are things that would need to be accounted for at various developments as they came online. And then as we transition past the Red Rock site, past Dukeville Street and towards Leonard, it would transition back to your 2-lane section, which is out there currently today. But it would also show wider paved shoulders, which is beneficial, one from a safety perspective, also from a heavy truck traffic perspective, a little additional width, run off road, a little bit of opportunity to correct and not potentially crash. So those are a few enhancements as well. So east of I-85, this is the area that we're just showing. It transitions from that 4-lane median divided to a 3-lane section, and then ultimately back to an existing 2-lane section with wider paved shoulders. Before we get into the cost estimates, one thing I want to note on the conceptual layouts is because these site plans are not necessarily finalized, and we don't have a lot of detail on specific access. The plans, the conceptual layouts we have don't show specific median breaks along the corridor. Access points would need to be refined as development comes online in the future. So that's just one thing to note, is that as developments get more solidified, defining access breaks and medians would be critical to maintaining mobility along the corridor for residents as well as business. So the planning level cost estimates, we broke it into 3 different segments. Essentially west of I-85, the I-85 interchange area between the service roads, and then east of I-85. These are some large numbers, but we used NCDOT planning level estimates. So kind of the first step in the process is looking at these cross-section costs to convert from what there is today to the proposed cross-sections, as well as upgrading the interchange and the overpass. Total, the cost is above is $67 million. That is no small cost. That is a large cost for essentially this 3-mile corridor, looking out with the high-end future development. As Ed mentioned, some of this cost can be shared by future development, and there's various ways of doing that. But there still will be some costs that the interchange area that are not necessarily going to be likely specific to a particular development. So looking at options to plan for the future program projects that could be part of NCDOT's long-term program would be critical to helping build out this corridor. A few policy recommendations are for both Rowan County and Spencer. We looked at recommendations and policies and figured out what are some things as developments come in that could be considered. One is the TIA assessment. So just making sure that various developments are conducting traffic impact assessments to determine their impact to the corridor financially and also from a traffic perspective. And then having those items reviewed by the town, the county, or a third party. Thank you. Also is right-of-way reservation. So making sure that minimum right-of-way is reserved so that the appropriate improvements, if not built by that particular development, can be built at a later date without incurring additional costs for right-of-way acquisition. And then another one is cross-access between adjoining parcels. So we used a conservative estimate that these parcels, not knowing the exact makeup of them, that they're not necessarily interconnected with each other. But one of the primary things of access management is interconnecting development so that traffic doesn't necessarily have to come out onto Long Ferry to take a trip next door. So the ability to interconnect and provide cross-access to developments is key, not only to reducing impacts on the Long Ferry, but making it more convenient for adjoining land uses to access each other. So, but with that, I'll turn it to Ed and see if you have any closing remarks, and then we'd love to open it up for any questions or comments.
One thing I'd like to do, Bradley was on such a good role, is Phil Conrad's here from the MPO, and I think when we look at some of these planning level cost estimates, there's some sticker shock and what it means to could mean to the town and certainly to the county. These are significant numbers. But I'd like for Phil to come up here and just reiterate the role that MPO plays in our transportation planning process. I know for some of you guys that participate in the MPO, you probably are aware of this, but we've got a good attendance from the public, and I think it'd be interesting for them to hear. We also have some folks from the division office here from DOT. So if you've got any questions about that, I think now would be the appropriate time to ask, because a lot of what we're talking about is transportation. So, Bill?
Good evening. Thought I'd gotten out of the presentation there.
So just want to recognize a couple of our board members, Mr. Miller, Mr. Eds, that are on the MPO board, strong members in participating on your efforts as a delegate from both the town and from Rowan County. This is a highly technical study, obviously. A lot of work went into it. I was involved in a lot of the planning meetings, working with a consultant. I want to compliment WSP for an excellent job on the study for both jurisdictions. The thing I would say and would want you to take away tonight is that this project will take probably about 3 different buckets of funds to complete. One is the partnership you have with the local development community. There are several technical recommendations that that the town and the county can weave into their ordinances that will allow for some short-term improvements, and that's important. That's something that we have done that has been done in other communities. That's been done here in Rowan on occasion. But with a study like this, it really empowers your planners, your planning boards to really be proactive in terms of identifying what the vision is for this corridor. Second bucket is through the division. We've got division folks over here. Raise your hand, division folks. One. They are a key partner in all of our projects. The way our system is set up through NCDOT now with what's called the Strategic Transportation Initiative, initiated under Governor Pat McCrory. We basically submit projects for what's called quantitative scoring. You can see, as Mr. Muir indicated, some fairly large-scale projects that could be part of that process. And I'm sure we'll want to talk with you and your staff, and the board members here will want to have conversations with their colleagues on the MPO board. That's the long game. It's something that, if you guys remember Old Beatty Ford Road and I-85, we spent many years working on getting those projects into the STIP and ultimately funded. But I definitely want to highlight the division's role in that process, as well as they work with us in terms of smaller scale projects, and that may be an opportunity, particularly at some of these intersections, for some spot safety improvements. We have some experts here from the division office in terms of traffic and accidents, etc. So we'll want to be looking at that perhaps in the short term. But again, I want to compliment the town and the county as part of that project identification process. Typically, we don't have this amount of data and this amount of effort. So kudos to both the town and county for participating in this study, and it will be a great tool for staff and elected officials to come up with future projects for the corridor. I will say one thing about the corridor: even with Red Rocks or without Red Rocks, it is going to grow out there. The traffic is going to grow exponentially. It's a key corridor to get to High Rock Lake. There's a lot of development there at the interchange. The interchange in and of itself could be a separate, fairly expensive project. So it's really good to see pen to paper and the numbers and recommendations that have come out of this study. Well, thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Conrad.
So real quickly, I want to talk about next steps. So what we anticipate, this is a planning process. There's a planning document. This is the first draft. This is the first look. We want to make sure that both our boards are comfortable with what's being proposed. One thing I would tell you is that you've got the executive summary. I think it's about 20-some pages. But if you want to see the whole enchilada, it's about 700 pages. There's a lot of data there. There's another version that's probably in the 70-page range. Bradley's smiling. He did a good job putting all this together. But nonetheless, there's a lot of technical data, as Bill mentioned. A lot of thought went into it. Took a lot longer than we anticipated, but I think we've got a product that both jurisdictions can use. So what I think our next steps are is we're going to take this to the public. We've generated some property owner information, and we'll send out mailers to the folks in the corridor. Probably hope to have a meeting somewhere in the corridor, like Miller Ferry Fire Department or somewhere like that. Get some feedback from them, and then we take it to our planning boards. At least that's what we're proposing to do. Let them look at it, have a courtesy hearing, and then we would come to the individual boards, or at least we'll take ours to the commission and hopefully get it adopted. A lot of the things that are in here are the tools that we will use when these development projects come back to us, and I would think Steve would do the same thing for the town board. There are going to be recommendations and policies that you will buy into to promote the corridor to still be a viable economic development corridor for us. Did you have anything to add?
Don't get him started. Do y'all have a timer?
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Put the clock on.
Already started 2 minutes ago.
This is not news to our board. Our board's been talking about the growth in the corridor and the growth on Longs Ferry Road for last year and a half at least. And one thing we identified early on was the need for an access road from Hackett Street, which is north of Longs Ferry, runs parallel to it, down to Longs Ferry, so that we could open up several hundred acres of developable property. That process started out with the developer being willing to invest money in actually building a road, and another property owner who was developing his property being willing to donate right-of-way for the road. And as working with DOT to figure out how to put all the pieces together, they've been helpful in leading us to some things we needed to solve, and then other property owners have fallen in line to say, yes, we'll work with you to solve those problems. So when we talk about future developers helping us build out this project, it's already happening. We're working towards that. I won't say we've skinned the cat and gotten it all done, but we're well on the way to making that access road about a mile of access road it's already in the plan. They called it the Montclair Hinkle realignment. That's your new access road. That's what that is. So I applaud our board for supporting that. We've got 7 major properties that are in the planning stages at this time. I would be a gambler to say that they're all going to go ahead and to fruition. I know at least 3 of them will probably break ground this year, this calendar year. And when that 2-lane country road starts to see the development of hundreds and hundreds of acres of property, then what you see up here will be a reality. It won't just be a future 20, 30 window of time that we need to think about doing something for the roads. It will be immediate. We'll need to be doing it immediately. So it's good that y'all are hearing it up front. I applaud the county for letting us be a part of this. I enjoyed working with these experts. They talk in numbers I don't understand most of the time, but I do understand what's happening in Spencer, and I think it was beneficial to all of us to be able to work together. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to open it up now for board questions. So if any of our boards and commission have questions.
I've got a couple, so go ahead, Pat.
I always have a question. I always have a question, and so my question is that we have heard something about improvements at that railroad crossing there on Long Ferry Road. How does that fit in, and where does that fit in, or is that viable with this project?
There is a grade separation, is what they call it. It's a bridge over the railroad tracks at Longs Ferry Road. The actual location of where that bridge will go is still up for discussion. That project is already in the TIP. I believe is that correct? You can explain that part of it. But that's something that has been a part of the planning process for a long time. You didn't see it in these pictures because, again, the actual location of the, I call it a bridge instead of a grade separation, a bridge. When that's pinned down, some of these drawings will have to be modified because it'll shift either to north or south.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that that project was incorporated as part of the study. It's unfunded currently. It's scored well in previous cycles. I think there's a strong chance that with the next STIP that it could get a schedule. It's a competitive project. And it's a good project. A lot of people use that sort of backdoor area to get to that portion of Rowan County, northern Spencer, et cetera. I mean, I use it actually. So, I mean, I think I've long advocated that as part of this corridor study, it's your gateway, either way, if you're looking towards Spencer or a gateway as you're moving out to the interstate. So, stay tuned. The schedule, we're getting ready to submit, we are in the submittal process. An STIP was just adopted in June by the Board of Transportation, so we're the 2-year cycle, so you're probably looking a year and a half out before we'll know definitively if it gets funds. So we'll keep your staff and elected officials involved.
Great. Mr. Morgan.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Well, let's go into the Wayback Machine. First of all, many years ago when Jake Alexander was planned, Jake Alexander Boulevard was planned, it was supposed to be a continuous loop around the entire county to mitigate the traffic, to keep the traffic out of the towns, and to flow it to and from I-85, Highway 29, and 601. The northern part of that loop just went away. There's been no discussion, not that I know of. I haven't heard anything in years. But now we're faced with trying to put a number 14 foot into a number 7 size shoe. There is a phenomenal amount of traffic that comes down 601 and comes across Ridge Road to Hollywood Drive and then to Charles Street. Charles Street looks like a moonscape. It comes past 2 schools in a residential area, and that little strip of road has been hammered. I mean, hammered to death. And yet the traffic still flows through there. Trucks, garbage trucks going to landfills, construction trucks, dump trucks. And I have squawked to Division 9 till I'm blue in the face. And I keep being told that, everything has a priority. Well, with all the development that's coming, and from everything that we have heard, something's going to have to be done to help skirt the traffic around Spencer and not just straight into it. One of the worst intersections here in town is the intersection at Charles Street, Longs Ferry Road, and North Salisbury Avenue, especially during peak hours and schools. And if you're talking about planning, wide vistas going out Long Ferry Road on the other side of I-85 and then coming back on this side, well, something's going to have to be addressed in terms of that intersection impacting that area that I just mentioned, because right now it's a nightmare, and soon it's going to be even worse. I mean, there's not even a traffic light there, and the way the little road there at the end of Long Ferry Road wanders around, it's going to be difficult. I know that there's been talk of a bridge being built over that, but it's a very short distance. It's a lot shorter than it is from Jefferson Street to the railroad tracks, or from that area of Long Ferry Road to North Salisbury Avenue. So again, going back to the Jake Alexander Boulevard, we're stuck. Development is upon us, and the quicker we can solve this problem, the better. And I hope that, again, that DOT and the rest of you understand that that whole area up there probably needs to be addressed and incorporated into these plans to take traffic out Long Ferry Road.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Other questions from board members?
I got a question real fast. One of the things I think a lot of people are curious about is that this new stretch's traffic lights. Can you address the traffic light situation as far as on Long Ferry Road?
Yes. So there's a couple of things. As we talk about developer commitments and improvements, I'll just go back to one of the initial slides and study. Go back to the opening slide here. So Red Rock's development as part of their traffic impact assessments and some of their committed improvements, I do believe that they have 3 traffic signals proposed as part of their development, kind of on the eastern side of I-85. As part of this study, we looked at other intersections that may meet signal warrants, and then obviously with DOT approval of those signalized locations. So this study does assume, based on the volumes and the projections here, that both ramp signals are signalized at I-85. The Front Street intersection service road is signalized. The Montclair Hinkle intersection is signalized. And then also there are signals at both 29 and Long Ferry Road, as well as, sorry, is that Lane or Charles there? Drawing a blank, just east of the railroad tracks. So there are improvements that are recommended as part of this study to mitigate not just the corridor capacity, but also the intersection operations with those signalized locations.
Yeah, I've got a follow-up question to that, and I think I need both Bradley and Phil. And maybe it's good to start with Phil. Speaking about Jake Alexander and then also some of the intersection improvements as we go south on 85, I'm thinking about our southern one where we've got some traffic circles. And where Food Lion it's my understanding that Food Lion asked to have a traffic circle put out by their facilities so their big trucks didn't have to stop and start. My question is we have used this both for safety and for efficiency, movement of traffic down in the southern part of 85. Have we looked at that for this project? I mean, when we talk about all of these cars, I mean, Jake Alexander does absolutely nothing when it comes to traffic calming. And when you look at the intersection of Julian and Jake, and also 150 and Jake, and also the next intersection, I mean, you can just go right up and down, and people speed, they run their red lights, and then we've got big accident numbers on that road in there because it goes from 35 to 50. So roundabouts is one. So let's start with that.
So roundabouts is an interesting topic.
I know it's.
I don't know that we have never prioritized a roundabout. It's usually a design consideration, and folks that are with the division can probably speak more eloquently about what are the warrants of when a roundabout is included. I think about the roundabout that we have out in Rowan County on 801. Sherrills Ford Road. Those I would say that the jury was somewhat out when that was built, right?
Yeah.
There were some consternation about it. So we've, from our perspective, and I guess I'm speaking for my board members too, we really haven't
ask for roundabouts to be included as part of a project. If that's something that, you know, the local governments want to pursue as part of a corridor or as part of a project, that's certainly something that we can, you know, bring before our board and have some discussion.
Well, I
We
really
have some,
want,
I will say this, we have some folks that represent us in Raleigh that are not fans of roundabouts. And so
I
they,
understand
you know,
that.
they are influential in the, you know, distribution of funds, and we're certainly sensitive to that. I personally like roundabouts. I'm not sure about the application on Jake Alexander Boulevard. It could work. Would be a hell of a big roundabout though. There
Oh,
at
yeah.
150. So excuse my French, but I think it, you know, there are certainly instances where it could be, you know, a productive measure. It
Yeah.
keeps
And
the
I-
traffic flowing. You're right. There's safety components to it.
Yep. Fuel efficiency.
Fuel efficiency.
less
I don't have the picture, but I
pollution.
was in Kannapolis 2 Sundays ago, and they have a roundabout as part of a streetscape project. And a food line truck got stuck on the roundabout, tore up their streetscape project, and I had to call their city engineer. And I'm like, you got to get people down here, a cop. So you know, there are some sort of unintended consequences with roundabouts that you have to really be careful about. So
Well, I just think especially of the safety part of it.
Yeah.
And like I said, because stoplights, I'm sorry, it doesn't.
Right.
Absolutely doesn't. And perhaps our police officer friends there might be able to talk about that too. But yeah, it's dangerous out there.
right. And Jake is particularly dangerous. I happen to be stuck over there at 5 o'clock on one afternoon and could not turn from the gas station north on Jake. So I put it over to the KFC for dinner and waited for the traffic to sort of die down before I decided to pursue it. I would like to hit the question about the Jake Alexander Boulevard extension. That project was actually scored, I think it was 2 cycles ago. This was when, and it's been a while because I believe Mr. Walters was your manager at the time, and we submitted that project. Didn't score well, but I would say that times change and development has changed since the time that project was scored, and so it may be time to reevaluate it and you know, see how the score looks. I mean, it's a lot. I'll be honest with you, a lot of it's based on projected traffic, and so it's, you know, you can say, well, we've got a lot of development coming out here, but unless it's sort of a done deal, it's very difficult to incorporate it as part of the quantitative score. It's still on our plans. It's still on what's called our comprehensive transportation plan. And so it's a legitimate project. I would say its day has not come yet. So.
Can I just follow up again?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about putting roundabouts on Jake. I mean, that, you can't even fit a frontage road in there, which is what should have been done, at least back then. But I could say several things about why those things don't happen, but because I had some of that back where I lived in Wisconsin too. But this has got to be, and I'm talking to our division folks too. I've had division folks tell me, well, it's just not enough traffic. We don't have the evidence and to put the cost into it. This has got to be a visionary road. I mean, and when you look at what 85 and Copperfield and going into Kannapolis and Concord, you know, it takes a while to get used to it, but these things work. And I would like to see, number one, the accident ratios of those roundabouts down there compared to what's going on, Jake. And then number two is an overall number. You're you know, representing the MPO, so you know what's going on in your territory. But you know, that to me, it's the safety issue.
And NCDOT, we're fortunate. There's a lot of safety data out there. You're sort of skirting around an issue that we often find is when we have a project and it perhaps doesn't quite meet the warrants. Over time, it's unfortunate because maybe you have a fatality and then it elevates the project. And so, part of our mission here is to avoid those fatalities and identify projects that, we can move forward that have that safety component using the data that's available to us. And I think that's quite frankly an important part of bringing it back to Long Ferry Road, the safety aspect there. You don't have, particularly on the eastern section, you don't have the development there yet. But quite frankly, once, let's say Red Rocks comes in and other developments out there, you'll see a lot of back end accidents. You'll see really some pretty serious issues. And so that's the point of doing a study like this, is to identify ways to mitigate that, ways that, your planning staff can work with you to maybe limit the number of driveways, maybe strategically place some roundabouts out there if it's the will of the community. I want to be sensitive to that if it's the will of the community. But yes, that's the whole point of sort of these more visionary exercises with corridor studies like this.
And the other thing too is reserving right away in as we go out Long Ferry, in case at some point we need to have frontage roads. Because if Long Ferry is going to continue to be that major artery out to the eastern part of our county, once the road gets wider, we want people to go out to Dan Nicholas. We want to even increase more of our tourism. Another question I have is, why is it the west side of this project that has the pedestrian right-of-ways, for the bikes and the people walking? I know that that's not a tradition here. However, when we look at our other fellow communities, when people coming in are looking at why they want to move somewhere, people from other areas of the state or, other states look for that type of recreation avenue. And so personally, I would like to have at least the right-of-way reserved to be able to do that and go out to Dan Nicholas on Long Ferry.
So that's a value judgment for your board. I would encourage you to talk to your board.
I know.
We're supportive of the cross sections and meeting the demands of the community. So we're all about the multimodal.
I know what my chairman's already going to say to me. So it's not. But I want this.
Let's have coffee.
Yeah. Well.
So.
No, I would like our county, our community, to start thinking in a more futuristic way.
Mm-hmm.
We know that it's going to develop, but it's not even just going to be business. We're going to have people and new subdivisions and, on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So I've made my point.
My question kind of goes exactly along that same vein of being visionary. What we're trying to do with this study is make sure that we know the impacts and we plan for the impacts. There's going to be impacts, and we have folks that are here tonight because they want to know what the impacts are going to be. And I think inevitably we can all stand up here and say, or sit up here and say, there are going to be impacts because it's a chicken or an egg sort of thing. We can't go out. NCDOT is not going to fund a project to go out if we don't have some of those developments already coming in. They have to be locked down and they have to be solid. They have to prove that we're going to have those traffic counts. And so we see it from a planning perspective. What I hope we don't do is get into a situation that we have to have those properties under development and on the ground to be able to prove that we need that. I think that if we see the trend, which we're already seeing, as you heard from Mr. Blunt, we've got multiple properties now that are under, I mean, they're basically going to be breaking ground this year, right? And so they're going to be operational within the next 2 years. And we looked, and the plans that were, or the planning tools that were presented showed 2030 potential build out if that happens within that area. That's 6.5 years away. Now, it's unlikely that all of that will build out in that amount of time, but I think the reality that we have to recognize is there's no way that project's going to get built in 7.5 or 6.5 years. And so we're going to have to make sure that as we plan this, that we do a good job planning and not letting it overdevelop during that time.
Right.
But we also need to make sure that we are progressively expanding that corridor through there, right? That we're starting. I mean, we need to be starting now with some of those, and I think we are. I mean, the access, the realignment of Hinkle and Montclair is definitely going to help alleviate some of that. But we've got to find a way to partner with DOT to make sure that this gets priority. And so I guess my ask would be on behalf of the Spencer board and hopefully on behalf of the county as well, that the NPO is advocating for us and that our NCDOT regional folks are working to advocate, because we see the writing on the wall. And what I don't want is the people that are here tonight to have to suffer because of it. The development is coming, right? It's going to come because your neighbors have sold property. They've sold it to developers, and so the development is coming. Our job as planners, as elected official, as DOT, is to make sure that those impacts are minimized for y'all. And I think that's what this whole exercise is, to show us what the impacts are going to be. Now's the time we've got to, the rubber hits the road, right? Where we need to start planning and we need to start getting some improvements funded and happening.
Just a little point about the horizon year 2030. We fought pretty hard. I think the consultant wanted to push that out even further. I know my point was that the way things are moving along this corridor, 2030 may be a little short-sighted. But you got to pick a point, right?
That's right.
And 2030 corresponds with a year in our travel model, which doesn't mean anything to anybody but me. But it's a tool to project traffic along the corridor, and so we needed a point. I think the other thing that you're alluding to is that we have a infrastructure system, our transportation system, that does not react quickly, and we're frustrated with that. But on the flip side of that, I would say this is a good problem, because when I moved here in 2002, there wasn't a heck of a lot going on Long Ferry Road, and congratulations to the commission and the town for getting development and putting us in this position. So it's a problem, but it's a good problem to have. The real question for our community is going to be, in my opinion, is the Long Ferry Roads, the 152s, the Jake Alexander Boulevards. At what point do we sort of take our destiny into our own hands? And the department has a system. It reacts at its own scale. We get some projects along the way, Old Beatty Ford Road, I-85. But in some communities, there are other opportunities. And I hate to use the word tax, but that's what it is. It's a tax for roads, and that's what they do in South Carolina with York County, the Pennies for Progress. And so we're not there now. But, at some point, I think we'll be looking at these scenarios and saying, hey, we need to pick off 3 or 4 projects every year. And we need to fund it ourselves. We need to partner with the DOT. We need to get the General Assembly involved. Because once you have sort of that local seed money, you can do a lot more things. And it may be as simple as, early as an intersection project or a roundabout or something like that. I'm not suggesting we take the whole corridor on as a local project. But that's sort of the evolution of transportation finance and the way that sort of work. We're not there now. Right now, we're in, give us the free stuff. We still want the free stuff. I want the free stuff. You know, give me the interchange at Old Beatty. Give me the Northern Rowan interchange. Give it to me. Give it to me free. And we're still working those channels, and we should continue to work those. But at some point, your success catches up with you, and you have to think about, okay, well, what are some other avenues that we can pursue?
So along that line, if we're thinking like that, you know, and Bradley, you may have some input on this. If we then start talking about a phased approach, what's the recommended phasing for that? You know, what would we bite off first? What's going to have the biggest impact on starting to alleviate some of the long-term concerns?
Well, I wish that were an easy question and looking into
I know, I put you on the spot. It's difficult.
But generally, the intersections are your capacity constraints. So that's generally where you see the congestion happening first and foremost as development starts on the corridor. So improving specific intersections are kind of one of the first steps. Auxiliary turn lanes, signalization, other intersection treatments. From a corridor perspective, the interchange area and the two service roads are going to be hit the hardest with new development and increasing traffic, because the majority of traffic, particularly the industrial and commercial, are trying to access I-85 to and from. So, you know, that's probably the one from a corridor perspective. We're looking at the three segments, kind of provides the most thing for your buck, with other intersection improvements along east and west of I-85. But again, that's just one initial thought of the corridor and how progression could occur.
You've been awfully quiet.
I'm saving up. So I want to ask some questions to the citizens that are here tonight. How many of you, by show of hand, live along in some way, either west or east side, Long Prairie Road? Okay. If you live on the Spencer side of 85, raise your hand. Okay, and then on the west side, the east side. So a lot of folks on the east side. So if I'm you, how do we fill in the blank? We're talking about roads and development, but how did we get to this point where we're talking about roads and development? Yes. No, we're kind of in the middle of a meeting here. So yeah. Yeah.
I want Icefield Road, Icefield Forum, development. And in there is a wiggle station. We have kids, there's 3 schools on the other side, high school, elementary, and middle. That's a lot of traffic. I know, I've lived on Long Bridge 27 years. Chewy was a nightmare. When they changed 85, that was bad enough to crank. We have to go to them. We have a lot of old people out there. We have emergency. We can't get anywhere. Chewy took an hour to get me because we had to stop doing this. And they have all lined up on the driveway. And we're sitting there waiting. This is something that needs to be addressed. Higher number. I wanted somebody to address human. We live there. There's that nice little stop cafe. Look at it exactly. The lines there. All in all of them. Higher space. They don't live. Happens on Jake. Happens on him. They're really nice to dance with.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, stick around, you'll hear it. We're going to talk about that. So the question becomes, what is happening? This is where a lot of rub comes in leadership. If Judy and I look back to 2014 when we ran,
we're facing an issue not too long ago, and I use this all the time, by saying Rowan County still holds the record for the most jobs lost in a single day. And so we're in a situation where we're approaching the high 20s in poverty in Rowan County and double-digit unemployment. We have textile mills that leave thousands of people behind with a 9th grade education. So what do we do? There's a human story. What do we do for those folks? Well, what leadership did is tap into Rowan Cabarrus Community College and work with the state for retraining dollars to get folks trained to be able to have a job, because all they ever knew was the textile mill. In fact, they were living in a textile house and shopping in the textile mill store. Everything was controlled by that. And folks couldn't see a future beyond that. And so the question became, in an economy that was failing in Rowan County, what do we do to begin to build an economy where people can thrive and have hope and see a future for them and their kids? So that's a long story about back then and how we get to now. It involves thousands of people involving themselves and try to build a new story for Rowan County. And so depending on how you feel about development, we're either on the right side or the wrong side of it now. So when we're talking about the human part of it, we've got a community that we have very wealthy people, Food Lion, stuff like that. And then we've got a large segment of folks who can't afford to live. They're working 2 and 3 part-time jobs with 0 benefits. And they needed help and hope. And so we started organizing ourselves to become attractive to companies that would bring relief to the citizens of Rowan County so they could have jobs, so they could provide a home that they could own, a 401k, paid vacation, dental, medical, and all of that. And the quickest way to do that is do it on a large scale. Would I rather see us, from an economic standpoint, build thousands of 10-person businesses? You bet we would, because that diversifies, and all of those aren't going to go under all at once. But bringing companies like a Chewy was already mentioned. You know, there's individuals that own that land out there that have a right to determine what they do with their land. And so Chewy came along, and Chewy was a godsend for Rowan County. And they were going to hire 1,200 people. Scott's here, 1,200. What are they up to, 1,600 now? And these folks are making good wages with benefits and retirement and everything I've already talked about. But we've got a lot more folks out there that need that, and folks in our surrounding communities. So the rub really becomes, as these companies that we're trying to attract in here, not for numbers, but for people, for humans, for future, for hope, where are we going to put them? So I want to talk about what I'd like for you to hear what I'm thinking. And so that you guys know that are here tonight, if you all don't know, Long Ferry Road will be my home in about a month. So I will travel Long Ferry Road 8 times a day for the rest of my life until they haul me off in a box. So please understand, everything that we see here, I'm going to live. So if you're thinking, well, y'all don't have to deal with this, yes, I do. I do have to deal with this. So I'm very attuned to what is going on out there. So I can't talk about the city side of 85. I can talk about the county side of 85. And just Red Rock has come along. Markets are changing, capital markets are changing. We expected that they would have broken ground by then. You've seen the signs go up. They're still working toward development. But as my front of my car hits the property for Red Rock, by the time I get to 85, it's 7/10 of a mile from 85. And personally, we feel that is reasonable, that something within a mile of the corridor of 85, whether it's Long Ferry Road or Peeler Road or Webb Road or 29 or Jake, whatever those are, that seems to be reasonable. So if I'm you and you're hearing development, 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 I would sit staring at me and saying, how much more? What is Long Ferry going to look like? And I'm going to tell you, personally, I do not favor any industrial development beyond the Red Rock property. Now, that is not now. Let's take Red Rock out of it. You're going to see housing developments coming in up Long Ferry Road because people want to be near the lake. And so that's going to happen. So that's going to present some traffic issues as well. There's some industrial that's going in behind the BP on Long Ferry Road. That's going to affect us. I don't think it's going to be that much, but that is there's a project I know that's being planned behind there. That's going to be a city project. They've already annexed that out there. But beyond Red Rock, I don't have any personal desire for the people of Long Ferry Road to see any development go beyond that from an industrial standpoint. So if you look at these, and I don't know how we make this available to you guys, but if you look at these, the road discussions seem to end at the end of the Red Rock project, don't they? Okay, so yeah, so Leonard Road, and it doesn't go beyond that. So the question is, with development of residential and if Red Rock continues, then this is good news for those of us that have to travel that road because it gives us multiple lanes and ways to travel.
I think there's a giant bookend, right? And that bookend is the Duke Energy combined cycle plant.
Yeah.
That's what kind of stops the development.
So I'm a business owner. I'm a husband. I got 3 kids that grew up here. I got 4 grandkids. I'm getting old. I'm not from here, but I've sold my soul to Rowan County and sacrificed to try to really make folks proud of opportunity this year. I get the opportunity to go out and talk to kids all the time, whether it's in K-12, whether it's in college, Livingstone, Catawba, early college. And this is what bothers me is when I get the opportunity, I ask kids, how many of you, what is your plan for when you graduate from high school or college? How many of you plan to stay here, get married, raise a family, start a business and all that? And you know what the answer is? It's most of the time, none of them. Now, reality is we're a little more mature. We understand a lot of them will end up staying here, but that breaks my heart. And when I get a chance to ask the crowd why, most of them say, with some exceptions, I don't see any opportunity in Rowan County. And that's heartbreaking. And so now I've got 3 kids. One lives in Huntersville. One lives in Sanford, Florida with her husband and 2 kids, my grandkids. One in Huntersville with her husband with 2 of my grandkids. And my son still lives here in Rowan County. He's in Cleveland. And now I've changed my will. He gets everything at this age. That's not true. But this is something that we've talked about publicly before. Rowan County invests between $10,000 and $15,000 per year on our students in K-12 education. Those kids go off to college and they never come back. And the biggest investment we have is in our kids financially, emotionally, support-wise, and everything we do. We send them off to college, pay $100,000+ to send them off to college, and then they don't come back. And I kind of joke about it, but I'm being serious. The mayor of Huntersville, North Carolina, has never sent me a thank you note. My daughter and her husband started a thriving business in Huntersville. They didn't do it here. My daughter in Sanford and her husband, the mayor of Sanford, Florida, has never sent me a Christmas card or a thank you note written to the citizens of Rowan County for investing in the education of my daughter so that they can enrich the people of Sanford, Florida. So one of the things that everyone sitting here without exception thinks about all the time is how do we bring opportunity so that your kids and grandkids can grow up where you live? And that is one of the driving forces. Now, that means that someone's going to build a facility that is going to slow your track home in a couple of these roads. We've mentioned Peeler Road and Webb Road and all that. This is why we're trying to have these conversations. How do we do it safely? How do we do it efficiently so that the travel can be even better than it is today? I'll tell you, I'm terrified of driving down Long Ferry Road at night because that road is skinny. And it's funny, when I was sitting out front, something I've been meaning to do, I texted one of our DOT guys. I've never met you. Are you Kelly? Never met him. Pat Ivy from Division 9 gave me Kelly's number. And the reason I texted Kelly, I didn't know he was here tonight. But I'm sitting here with DOT, it reminded me, and I texted him and said, a local business owner and family guy and friend of ours called me a couple weeks ago, and he and his family spending the day at the lake with his parents. And they were heading back into town, and the intersection, you'll know what I'm saying, intersection of Long Ferry Road and what did I say? Goodman Lake Road is terrifying. And this father watched a car coming up Goodman Lake Road and never hit its brake. And they watched their son right in front of them. The wife started panicking, thinking they're going to see their son die right there. So I got a call begging, can you and DOT look at a flashing yellow light and a red light there? Because folks fly through across Goodman Lake Road all the time. Our fire folks can probably tell us about that horrible intersection. So these things we're talking about, yes, it's about coming development. No, it's not about building industrial all the way to the lake. I'm not in favor of that. But I want you to know that as we're talking about development, it's not about numbers. It's about people and opportunity. And last thing I'll say, I mean, if you ever come to a county commission meeting, you know I run my mouth a lot. But I want you to have insight into what our thinking is. When we came into office, we did a lot of study. We found that in Rowan County, the tax revenue per citizen we were bringing in was lower than every county around us in the region. Now, that was not a call to raise taxes. It was a call to ask questions about why can we not build new schools? Why is it hard for us even to afford to put a roof on an old school? Why are we losing our employees to other counties because we can't pay them enough and the turnover rate of our employees is so high? Why is our infrastructure not in place? And so we found out that the reason that our tax revenues were not what others were, and we couldn't make investment like other communities could, was because of the industrial piece. We had not yet figured out how to bring in high dollar, high tax paying folks could help fund this. When you see industry going up, you need, this last thing I'll say, you need to recognize that those folks are the hedge against high residential tax rates. We cannot balance the books. We cannot provide schools and teachers and infrastructure and repairs based on the taxes that residential brings in. Those industries require very little services from us, where residential is very service intense. And so these industries are what help us keep tax rates down. So I've exceeded my 3 minutes by a minute, by great minutes. But especially for my friends on the east side, I want you to have some insight into what we're thinking. We don't want to turn Long Ferry Road into Mooresville. We don't. I don't. I don't want to live in that. But we feel like the 1 mile distance from the interstate is reasonable. So.
And I'll piggyback on that from the town's perspective, because we, over the years, have had residents come to us. So I guess over the years, we've seen lots of retail, community services, whether that be pharmacy, bank, those sorts of things. We've seen them pack up shop and leave. And it's because we don't have the base within our community, or that what we've been told is we don't have the base within our community to support those locations. Well, as we have residents that come to us asking for those different services, in order for us to be able to attract those type of small town shops and companies and services, we have to have that missing link, and that's that industrial or large commercial piece. And so in order for us to bring what the citizens of Spencer are asking us to bring, we've got to diversify our portfolio. We've got to have that industrial component. And we are incredibly fortunate that we have a bounded area between Highway 29 and I-85 that kind of confines that growth to one strategic area. And it's a piece of land that people are very, very interested in right now. And so for us, I really think the future success of Spencer and our future prosperity hinges on being able to develop those particular parcels. Going along with that, though, is we have to make sure that the infrastructure is in place to support that, to support those businesses, but probably more importantly, to support the residents that are already there. Other comments from the board? We appreciate the time to get together and hear this together and talk through. These are good. These are problems, but they're good problems to have. And they're fun solutions to work on. All right. I'd like to thank. You're going to say, okay, WSP for the work that you've done on this. We appreciate the planning departments and the work that you've put into coordinating that, and thank you to the commissioners for meeting with us tonight, providing your input as well. All right. We have reached the end of our agenda, and so for the town, is there a motion from our board to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
Motion by Mr. Morgan, second by Mr. Howell. All in favor? All right. All opposed? All right. We stand adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.